Hi, my name's Jillian Cypress, and this is me making a handmade accordion book. First thing that I do is I write down supplies I'm going to need, any goals that I have, my intentions with the project. Then I got started and measured the supplies that I had. I had corrugated cardboard and decided to cut it down to 3.5 by 5. Use some regular sketch paper and then trim some long strips. Cut the sheet that I had down into 2 strips by 5 inches each. I used the little scrap of paper that I had left over to do a test of my watercolor. Then I trimmed down the cardboard, got rid of this messed up end, and up in the corner you can see I'm testing out kind of at the same time how the watercolor paper would hold up. Then I just trimmed the cardboard down for the front and back cover. Next I folded the paper 3.5 inches with the ruler to get a nice straight edge and then folded it against itself. Just kind of eyeballing it there. Then folding the second strip of paper. You can see my watercolor test turned out okay. It was a little buckling. Next I trimmed the corners of this corrugated cardboard. I marked it and then cut it with scissors. Next I primed with this white gesso, doing a thick coat on the front and filling in the cracks of the corrugated cardboard. While that was drying, I went to attaching my pages. I laid it out to see how many pages I wanted. I knew I wanted to have 4 inside pages and then 2 on the outside, so just trimmed that down with scissors. Next, using a clear craft glue, I glued those pages together and tried to smooth them out, making sure there weren't any little pieces left over. After that gesso dried, I filled in some more of those cracks in the cardboard with just school glue. Another layer of gesso on the back of the cardboard. I do a lot of these layers. Ended up doing a lot more of this than I had originally intended to. After the inside pages dried, I went ahead and trimmed them up, making them as square and as even as possible, just with scissors. I went ahead and erased some pencil lines that were at the bottom from my ruler marks. More gesso, filling in those cracks over and over again. I feel like I did that about 100 times. I know it wasn't that many, but I definitely didn't film them all. I did do it a lot thicker on this time. I was hoping I could get close to having the final layer done. Punched the corners off the pages to make them nice and round. Did a little browsing on Pinterest for some inspiration. Here I sketch out really lightly my base. There's spring is the first one, then summer and fall and winter. This is the fun painting part. I used watercolor pencils to start with. It's kind of my favorite way to start. Doing happy little trees, and over here's a little fence. Just this beginning of this multi-step process, a lot of layering. You can see I came back to this later in the day, and it had obviously gotten a little bit more dark. I realized if I'm going to do videos, I need to have a better light source, so I learned that in this process. I love using these watercolor pencils because you can lay them down just like a colored pencil and then add water, or you can wet your brush and apply it just like you would paint from a pan. They're solid watercolor, just in a stick form. One thing that I absolutely can't live without I use right here is my Master Brush Cleaner and Preserver. It's perfect for using with watercolors. It cleans the brush really quickly and can shape your brush. Adding more gesso to those front and back covers. This is my favorite part of working with gesso and using it as a cover, is applying this final layer. It's really thick. Use my palette knife, get it really on there, and then using paper and pulling it off and making these textures with the pulling back of the paper. You could use anything. Bubble wrap I think I might try next time. While everything was drying, I went back in with my pan style watercolor paints and added just more layers, more depth. More shadows. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm very new to watercoloring, but I love it. It's very relaxing and very fun. It's not as forgiving, but I'm okay with that. After the cover's dried, I went in with just a nail file and kind of cleaned up the edges. No sharp edges. You can see it kind of went a little bit smoother. Then I added this acrylic paint, this purple color. While it's still wet, I went back over with a brush and just kind of made it a little bit more matte. And more watercoloring, more little details, happy little details. Some snow and some shades, some green. Added more of that acrylic paint to the underside of the cover. This will be covered with paper, so I just wanted to get the very edges with paint. I decided to cover the back of my pages with some scrapbook paper, pretty purple lilac color, two different patterns, measured them out, cut them up. I used 4 pages, cut them as going to alternate patterns, measured them out so they overlap and stack. I used an Elmer's glue stick to attach the scrapbook paper to the rest of my pages. This was a little bit tricky. I wish I had made the scrapbook paper a little bit larger. It doesn't quite match up, but that's okay. I did the 2 center pages first and let them sit for a long time to get them nice and hard. Trimmed the excess off before moving to the other 2 pages. Use parchment paper in between whenever I'm gluing anything like that so it doesn't stick. And here we are just overlapping and trying to get them to fit. And they did not want to fit as well as I'd liked. I took them off and redid it several times to try to get it right. The roller that I have is I found near the Mod Podge, and it's been great for these things to really get stuff nice and flat. You can also use a glue stick to just roll over it and try to get the air bubbles out and as close as possible. And the clothespins are perfect for this project. I have several sizes of those. I used a matte Mod Podge for the outer cover. I really like the matte finish for this, and I applied it with a kind of with a brush and then with a sponge. I wish I'd used a better brush because I think here in a second you'll see me try to pick a hair out of it, which was really annoying. So use a at least moderate quality brush would be my best suggestion, and then a little sponge will help. I decided to attach a ribbon, so I kind of looked at what different colored ribbons I wanted to use. I thought I was going to use a darker one, but the lilac looked better. And I saw in a Japanese style accordion book that they put one on the front going forward and one on the back kind of going the opposite way so you can tie it together. So that's what I did using hot glue. If I had super glue, I would have preferred to do that over the hot glue, but this worked out fine. Double checked everything, cleaned up the edges before gluing this in. Using the craft glue again, I just attached the pages. Like I said, one way the ribbon was going out and one way the ribbon was going the other way. Use my clips again to hold the glue in place. That clear craft glue works really well actually. It was a little awkward because it kind of wanted to fall apart on me, so I ended up clipping and unclipping and re-clipping a bunch of times and just eyeballed it to get it about 1/4 of an inch on all the sides to try to make it as even as possible. While everything was drying, I decided to make some little embellishments. I was going to make some tags and a little pocket to put on the back side and on the inside cover. So here I'm making a little, I guess you'd call it a pocket for a tag using that same scrapbook paper and cutting down a tag. I found some purple origami paper and decided to make a little envelope. I like having a tag in the front of my books and an envelope in the back of my books. That's just something I've done with some other junk journals that I've done, so I decided to do a condensed down version for this one. Just trimmed out the corners to make it lie as flat as possible and glued everything down. I punched out the corners, which didn't work because the origami paper was so fine, so I ended up having to trim it with scissors anyway, but that's okay. And a hole punch, partial punch, to try to make it easier to get anything out of the envelope. That was something I learned on my first junk journal, that if the envelopes are too tight, you can't get anything in and out. This is what they call a piece of ephemera, just a little something that I got in the mail or with something I bought. Thought it was pretty. And I laid everything out on the back. I had some little stamps and some stickers, glued it down, had a tag, piece of lace, glued that envelope into the back, glued my tag into the front with craft glue there, giving it the last once over, trimmed up the ribbon, melted it down so it didn't fray, snipped all the little edges, added some shadows to my trees. I wish I'd done this a little differently, but you know, you live and learn. I think it still turned out pretty cute. So as I was finishing the tag, it got a little messed up. Here's me trying to finish up that tag. So I restarted, did a double-sided tag, and I decided that I was going to sew it with the sewing machine. Cut out a little punch, ran the edges through on the sewing machine really quickly. Turned out to be a happy accident. I like this tag better than the first one that I did anyway. While it was fresh in my mind, I went back and journaled other things that I used, what I learned, that kind of stuff. And a good finish to any project is wrapping it up with a nice bow. Thanks for watching, and here's the whole thing.